Welcome to the Forward Together webinar series, brought to you by the School of Management at California Lutheran University. The series is designed to bring interesting topics and people to our global community of students, alumni, and leaders in business and government to empower, educate, and inspire. Forward Together features experts from industry with the purpose to spark thought, connect people, and stimulate engaging discussions. Please submit your questions in the chat. We will hold a Q&A immediately following the presentation. Today's host is Gerhard Apfenthaler, Dean of the School of Management.
A very warm welcome from Thousand Oaks, California, the main campus of California Lutheran University. My name is Gerhard Apfenthaler. I am the Dean of the School of Management. I'm really excited about today's Forward Together webinar series event for two reasons. First of all, we haven't had one in a while. And secondly, we have a fantastic speaker and guest today, Paul Rosenberg, who has had a long career in industry, has been a visiting lecturer at universities around the world, and is an award-winning leadership coach, business developer, and speaker. And most importantly of all, Paul is also a Cal Lutheran MBA alum. So welcome, Paul. It's great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
How are things where you are?
Very good. Good. I'm in South Florida at the moment, so enjoying the sunshine still.
Wonderful. So, Paul, thank you for being with us, being such a loyal alum and supportive alum. We always love to bring our own back to inspire our community, our students, other alums, our faculty, and the wider community. And I'm really looking forward to today's webinar on managing your presence, showing up strong. So the floor is yours, Paul.
Thanks so much. Kind of homecoming for me. So thanks everybody for being here today. Today I want to talk about an important topic of presence, and I really want to cover three aspects of it. But I'll start with the one aspect that most people forget about. So if you'll indulge me for a second, I want to do something. Now, why did I pop that bag? This is my way of reminding all of us that we can break the circuit of that outside noise at any time. Right now, we live in a society where there is a deluge of information. Our phone is pinging us. Oh my gosh, how many likes did I get on Instagram? Or for some of you, how many right swipes did you get on Tinder? But I don't need to know that information. So there's this constant deluge of information, of noise. And sometimes what happens is that we get so caught up in it that we really aren't mentally present. So I want to talk about mental presence. How many of you have been in meetings with people who are there, but they're not there, right? Nothing's going in, nothing's going out. And with that, that means that that person is losing an opportunity to show up the way he or she wants to. So remember to back away. First of all, that bag is a reminder that we can back away at any time. Secondly, I want you to ask yourself the following questions, which is, what am I doing here? Not in the existential kind of, what's the meaning of life, but what am I doing here at this meeting with this conversation? What do I want out of it? In other words, with purpose. Think about it with purpose. And what you want out of it. And that will help create more robust mental presence. Otherwise, you're just going through the motions and you're missing that opportunity to add to whatever story or message you want out there in terms of how you're showing up. So what message are you sending? Take the time to slow down and think about, even if it's just a short little conversation, there's power in reflecting. I'd like to share with you a story of when I first realized that I could change my mental presence. This was when I was 21, I was working in a neurotrauma unit, which is brain injury, spinal cord injury. And just a brief background, there was a family, this guy was a lawyer. My folks were in a lawsuit after a car accident. He was the opposing lawyer. His name was Dosh. And he did something in the courtroom that will go to my parents' grave, but he almost got disbarred. So there's an adversarial relationship between his family and my family. I go to the patient board and there's Dosh, and there's only one Dosh in Denver on the board. And it was his son, Barry. So right there, I had a decision to make in terms of how I was going to show up. Was I going to show up as a disinterested member of the healthcare team, or was I going to show up with some impact? And I made a decision then and there that I had to show up differently, both for Barry's parents and for Barry. So I walked out, I told Barry's dad, who knew me, hey, he's going to be in great hands. I began to talk to Barry immediately, every day, and treated him as if he was out of that coma. He was a quadriplegic in a coma. They probably thought that he was going to pass away, that he was not going to make it through the coma. And I just every day we chatted about the weather, the Denver Broncos, which is my team, et cetera, et cetera. And then one day I was taking him to the bathing area with a friend of mine. And my friend said, hey, Barry, you're married. I wouldn't let Paul touch you. I was holding him by his butt. And he said, I wouldn't let Paul touch you there. And he burst out laughing and he came out of his coma and we became very good friends. So the lesson I learned that I want to kind of spread to all of you is a lot of the times we confuse activity with impact. And if we come from what's my impact versus what's my role, what's my job, what's my activity, then we're going to have a much more powerful presence. So please keep that in mind. It's all about the impact. It's not about what you do. It's about what you achieve or what you create through what you do and what you say. So this is the mental side of presence. So what is presence? It's a sum of experiences, communication, values, feelings that people get about you. It's pretty wishy-washy, soft stuff, a lot of it. And the longer you're with people, the more, we'll talk about that later, the deeper that presence gets, because there's multiple kind of touch points for how you're showing up. So whether you're at an interview or you're leading a team or you're part of a team or you're an entrepreneur, whatever that is, that sum of experience with your customers or with your teammates or with your boss or the people who work for you is fairly critical. So let's move to the physical presence side of that. And physical presence is really important, because once we have our mindset reset, the mental presence, then it's really how are we showing up? What are we saying? What are our actions? What are we doing right then and there? It's hard for all of us to live in the moment because we have, at least I do, I have lots of voices in my head that are constantly talking to me and taking me away from just being and listening and being strong and powerful in that moment. So I want to go through a couple of examples. The first one is I was working at the largest oil and gas terminal in the world in Azerbaijan, run by BP. My client was the terminal manager, and he got a call from one of the VPs in London, I think the number 2 or number 3. So this guy was a big deal, and he was on the speakerphone just demanding that this guy, John, give him an answer about some issue. And he was quite upset, this VP. And John sat there and didn't react. I'm watching John going, something's going on, right? John's presence was very thoughtful and very kind of slowed down, where most of us would have reacted to that emotional kind of somebody's jumping on my case. John took a deep breath and said, "Hey, I need an hour." Oh my gosh, that was not what the VP wanted here. He was screaming and yelling. And John just said, "Hey, I need an hour." And the VP said, "Why do you need an hour?" And he said, "Really easy. Do you want a decision, or do you want the right decision?" And that was just brilliant to me, that he wasn't allowing this guy's presence, which was agitated, to take him off what he wanted to accomplish, which was the right decision. Because guess what? If he'd made a wrong decision, he would have probably been fired or had something put in his personnel file. So either way, he was in a tough spot. So he really took his power there in the presence. The second thing I'd like to talk about is some of you may know I've spent time as a stand-up comic. And as a comic, I can't think of anything more powerful in terms of learning about presence, because you've got a room full of usually drunk people who want to heckle you or have an attitude of make me laugh. When I started in the comedy business, I was just shocked that my fellow comics would go to the bar and get their free drinks and whatever. I did nothing of that. I watched that audience. I listened to what jokes were working, because I only had 15 to 30 seconds to connect with them. And as an example, my material got really good, but some nights I bombed. Why? It wasn't the material, it wasn't the activity, it was the impact. Did I connect with the audiences? And the audience I connected with, we had a great night. The audiences I didn't connect with, I had a terrible night. They still had a good night because they loved the heckling and the booing and all that good stuff. So when I was in Sweden, where I started my comedy career, oddly enough, there was a drunk Finnish guy in the front row, and I'm watching him, and I was the opener, and I knew he was going to be trouble, and I got up on stage to do my thing, and he started doing this, wah, 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 and the audience just went nuts. And so we did it again. I started to talk, and he went, wah, 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 wah. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. He definitely had command of the crowd, and I had to figure out a way to get off stage that would honor, my commitment to the club owner and give the audience something that they would talk about, at least for that evening. So I basically said this: instead of saying I'm a comic, I have to go through with what I need to go through, I said, hey, let's call this guy Timo. He was Finnish. Timo, come on up. He's obviously funnier than me, and come on up. And the whole crowd cheered, and he grabbed the mic. And of course, he leaned into the mic and he went, wah, 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 wah. And the boos just came pouring out. And I knew that was what was going to happen. And that's how I was present enough to stay within that space and honor the impact and value for those folks. So really quickly, I want to talk about 3 women who are doing wonderful things. They're in the social media space, but it's the same for the business world and for life. Okay. First one is Doina Chobanu. She was one of the first influencers. She never started out to be an influencer, but she found that she connected in terms of her fashion sense. And she isn't one of those that does the pictures. I don't understand that, where they take a picture of themselves on the phone. But she really found a way to connect with her audience, and that's why she became who she is today. She's an influencer in every sense of the word, in terms of fashion, in terms of community issues. She's just herself. The second person who is on that list is a friend of mine named Carolyn Cleary, and Carolyn is in the mental health space. She started off as a fashion person, but she's in the mental health space. And her presence is really about the fact that she also has been very transparent about her mental illness, and it has that authenticity. And the third one is, again, another woman who some of you may follow. Her name is Rebecca, vocal athlete. She's one of those reactors, right? She's a vocal coach as well. And I talked with her at length, and she said, I never started out to have 1 million followers. She's very quirky. She's very funny. She's very out there. Some folks say she's a bit nutty, but she is beloved for who she is, not how she thinks she has to be. So this thread between those three women are authenticity, being yourself, none of this imposter syndrome stuff, being okay with who you are and how you connect. So those three are great role models for me in the leadership space. So let's talk a little bit about the next part of it, is something that I call absent presence, which I think is way more important than the physical and the mental. Absent presence is about the collective memory that you leave after you leave the meeting, or you do what you need to do, or you have your social media post, or you have the interview, or whatever that is you're doing in the business world or in your private life as well. Absent presence really is the sum of the collective resonance of who you are and how you're showing up. So what resonates with people with when they think of you? How do people feel about when they're reading a post, or whether, if you're leading them, how you're communicating, and are you motivating them? What are you creating in others? So two more stories. As you can tell, I love telling stories. Becky and Bill, opposite ends of the spectrum. Becky, I worked with in the Virginia class submarine program. So this is the folks who build the submarines, right? She's a VP. She senior VP. She ran the program. She had kind of 3 strikes against her. She was not an engineer, and engineers were at the top of the food chain there. She was a woman in a very male-oriented industrial world, and she was 6'4". So you can't miss her, right? She couldn't hide anywhere, which was good and bad. And she was having a lot of difficulty with her management team because they weren't aligning with the culture that she wanted, and it wasn't getting to the workforce. And one day we were having a chat. She goes, you know what, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to just go down to the shop floor, go on the sub. And in submarine world, there are packages that are put into the modules, right? So there's electrical work, there's pipe fitting, there's all these different trades. So she said, I'm going to start with electrical. She picked out an electrical package, walked into the sub, and everybody's like, uh-oh, what's going on here? Talking about a presence shock. And she, crawled in 6'4" into the sub, and the electrical team thought, oh my gosh, we're going to get fired or whatever, something's wrong. And she just showed up and said the following: I'm here to help you install this package. Tell me what gets in your way. Tell me how I can move up. She was handing tools. She was just being an assistant there. And amazing. And she did this with the 9 trades. And by the 3rd trade, she had that whole workforce aligned with her. It took her 3 hours. 3 different hour sessions because of how she showed up, which was helpful, support, inquisitive, focused on how to help them do their job better. An amazing moment of leadership. And she really transformed that whole culture. And there was nothing that workforce wouldn't do for her. She found a way to bypass middle management, which was not helping. They were kind of whining a lot. And she found a way to say, this is who I am and this is who we are. So there's a collective resonance, right? Becky wasn't on the shop floor for more than 3 hours, but that permeated that organization for years. So it doesn't take this heavy lifting, we think. It takes consistent messaging and authentic connection to make that happen. The opposite of our Becky is our dear Bill. Now, Bill worked for a major airline. I won't say which, but one of my clients in the maintenance department, Bill had previously to his role as operations manager, had negotiated the contract for the company again with the union. So already the union hates him. Why he would accept a job leading the people that hate him, I don't know, but that's a different story. And he, one day he called me into his office and he sat in one of these ivory tower kind of places, right? And he said, "Hey, Paul, I'm really upset." I said, "Why?" He said, "People aren't giving me a chance. They think I'm an asshole." And I said, "Are you sure?" He says, "Well, actually, I'm not, but I think they think I'm an asshole. So can you go down to the shop floor and talk to the workforce?" So right away, I knew we were in trouble because he's asking me to go down to the shop floor to talk to the workforce. And sure enough, I went to the workforce and I said, "Do you know who he is?" They said they'd never seen him. Right. So here's the director of operations. His presence was absent for sure. And the longer he wasn't on the shop floor, the more that story about him being an asshole, and there were other words, which I won't repeat here, permeated that culture, right? They just wrote him off. And so I went back upstairs and as if it was a kid on Christmas, he goes, "So what did you find out? Do they think I'm an asshole?" And I said, "Yep." And that's all I said. They think you're an asshole. He says, how do I change this, Paul?" And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Bill, stop being an asshole." So he didn't understand that he could change that perception by showing up strong in terms of his presence. He really felt, didn't grasp that he was allowing this other story to be told. So again, absent presence is really the sum of all the interactions, but it's the resonance that stays after you have the meeting, after you have the interview, after you've done those things. And for a Becky, she realized that by just taking those 3 hours, she actually did more visits, but after the 3 hours, like it was done. A powerful, authentic presence, whereas Bill missed his opportunity to change the story and change the dynamic of how that was unfolding. And he didn't last very long, actually. The moral to the story is he left. He was very unhappy, and the workforce didn't miss him at all because they never saw him in the first place. I'm just like, okay, why would you do this to yourself? But we all get lost in these assumptions and these tracks on that. So just remember, so we've kind of talked about the mental presence and clearing your mind. We've talked a little bit about the physical presence of being there and aware of how things are going, listening better, slowing things down to make sure that you're absolutely present. And the third thing is this concept of absent presence, which I think is super powerful. So I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to give you some homework. Okay. So everybody get out your pens and papers, not the number 2. We're not doing SATs or anything like that. But I want you to get out whatever you write with and write down the following. I want you to do a 3x3. And what I mean by a 3x3 is the following. Excuse me. I want you to ask 3 people the 3 words they think of when they think of you. So ask 3 people the 3 words, 1 word times 3, that come to mind when they think of you or they hear your name. So for example, if I asked you now, hopefully it would be fantastic, wonderful, humble. I'm the most humble person I know. I'm remarkably humble. I'm kidding. But it could be that I ask you and you say useless, boring, pathetic. And so by asking the people around you that you work with the most or that you trust the most, if you get words back that don't align with how you want to show up, then there's an issue and you can work on that. Again, don't be caught up in the I'm too old or things never change. You can always change. Go back to that paper bag, because that paper bag is a reminder that you can reset at any time. The mind can reset at any time. So remember that you have that in your power. If you don't like the story that you're telling, which is the story you tell by your presence, by your communication, by your values, by your actions, then change the story. Switch from activity to impact. And just remember that nothing is static that way, that you can manage that. So just in review, and then I think we can, I know it's lunchtime for some of you on the Pacific Coast, and I know you're all busy, but I'd love some move to Q&A. But again, let's recap, right? Number 1, mental presence, and you can always clear the deck and reset. What do you want out of that interaction, that communication, that activity, that action? What do you want out of it? Number 2 is the physical presence and being authentic, not being scared of listening to imposter syndrome and the voices. I have voices in my head. Here's a quick trick. It's kind of off, but it comes in. It's kind of off the agenda. But what I found is that I instead of trying to get rid of the negative voices, I learned this in COVID. I give them 10 minutes a day. Instead of trying to subdue them or suppress them, I let them run wild. I let them go bananas with all their fears, their worries, and they just go nuts. They have a fantastic time because I was tired of suppressing them. So give those negative voices, I'm an imposter, I'm not good enough, whatever, and then get on with who you want to be, and trust that that authenticity. You don't have to connect with millions of people. You know that, right? You don't need my friend Rebecca did not want 1 million followers. She has 1 million followers because she didn't want 1 million followers. So she just showed up who she is, and people love her for who she is. And all of us can have that space. And then the last bit of it is that absent presence, which is super important. Do your homework. Hopefully it'll be illuminating. I don't need to see it, and I'm sure everybody will get a gold star on their refrigerator, or you can buy yourself one yourself. But with that, I'm happy to open it up for some questions. And thanks for the time today.
Well, thank you, Paul. Very inspiring, and we have a couple of very specific audience questions to which I'd like to get in a moment. Throughout your presentation, I thought a lot about a saying that all of us have heard many times, right? There is never a second chance to make a first impression. Does that relate to your talk?
I think there is that. I think there's power in that first impression, but I also think that if you get an opportunity, sometimes you don't, right? If that first impression is bad, you don't get that opportunity. But I do think that there is an opportunity to change that. The first impression is always going to be there, but in my own experience, Gerhard, that I was interviewing to be a coach, actually, my first coaching job. And the first impression was good, but there was a lot of questions about could I handle, this industrial stuff that I do in the manufacturing and whatever. And I kept the dialogue open enough. The first impression was nice guy, smart guy, but he can't handle this, right? And so by kind of opening up the conversation to what are you seeing, to that feedback, I was able to then kind of have a second impression with this company, and it turned out to be with them for 25 years. In terms of, so I think there are some opportunities, but I agree that first step is always important. But if you have another chance, there are ways to change that messaging and that value. I don't know if that makes sense.
A reset is possible, right?
Yeah, a reset is possible.
Okay.
Not on job interviews, but most of the time, but a reset is possible.
Thank you. I want to get to a couple of questions, very specific ones. People are asking about the names of the 3 women/influencers that you mentioned earlier.
Okay. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Doina, Doina, Ciobanu, Ciobanu, and she goes on, I know, at least on Instagram, at Doina. On YouTube, Rebecca Vocal Athlete, RVA, Rebecca Vocal Athlete. And then for Carolyn, Carolyn Cleary or McMenamin, she just got married, so I don't know if she's swapped out her logos and all that good stuff, but I'd be happy to send that to you all, and that way anybody who wants to get in touch with them can get in touch with you, and then we can make sure that you have the right sites for that. But they are 3 very different, powerful, authentic, successful folks in terms of presence. So
the fact that they are very different leads me to another question from the audience. Somebody asked, doesn't it really depend on who you ask when you ask those 3 different people about the 3 words that come to mind? You can be very strategic, I guess, about who you ask.
Yeah,
right?
Agreed.
How do you get rid of that bias?
So again, that's a choice to make. Is in terms of what value you want out of it. I do it with clients. Excuse me. I do it with clients. So that's my choice. I don't do it with friends because I want to know, for folks who are paying me, how I'm showing up, and I want that. So it's a choice in terms of what do you want out of it. If it is if you're focused on family and you want to know how he's showing up as a family mentor, ask your family. I think that's the filter. What do I want out of this feedback? If you want feedback as a leader, now, everybody's doing 360 feedback and all that good stuff, but you might want to go to your trusted number 2s, number 3s, or the folks who influence your organization and ask them. So really that's up to you to control the quality of the output.
Right. We have another interesting question here, which is, when you walk into a room for a presentation in front of an audience, do you have a routine of how you enter, how you take the podium, and how you handle that first impression?
Yeah, the first thing I do is take a deep breath, and I'm super nervous before anything, which is good, right? I learned that from the comedy side, is that I usually jump on stage with some energy and get dynamic. So I want to, if you see me live, I want to jump on stage and start engaging immediately. And that's kind of my secret. It comes from the 15 seconds I had as a comic, and it just has stayed with me, that I look, if I'm doing a workshop or a class or whatever I'm doing, I look to making that first minute pretty magical and start connecting immediately. So that's been a great tool, no matter what kind of environment I'm in, that it allows me to create some energy and start interacting, pulsing, probing immediately to get going. So that's kind of my routine. There's not a walk-on song like they do in sports, but that's my way of doing with it. Is I give myself a minute to jump in and start to get to know the crowd.
But I guess different audiences would respond differently to that first minute, right? For some humor might work, for others, kind of a shocker might work. How do you read your audience? Is there a best practice?
Oh, geez, that's a tough one because it just comes from really going to where they're at. So I'm watching the audience if they're, if they're bored already or they're unsettled. I would probably choose the shocker. Something like the paper bag, is a way to kind of get their attention. It depends on how well I've set up the talk or whatever it is that I'm doing. Do I know anybody there, or has the leadership or whoever has brought me in? Have they given me kind of what they want out of it? But yeah, I watch, particularly I look in the first few rows to see who I can make eye contact with immediately. And yeah, sometimes they're listless. It's an after lunch thing, and I have to kind of go, okay, let's get energetic. Sometimes there's a buzz already, and then I probably will default to the humor side of things to keep things light. But it just there's no secret. It's just being attentive to what energy, and you really have to quiet yourself down and just it's a skill that's developed over time, and that's kind of what I use. I don't know if that helps, but
yeah.
quiet down and be present. If we're talking about presence, really be in the moment and just go, okay, I don't know who this crowd is. I've gotten a feel for them, and in that first minute or two, you have that space to kind of figure out who they are. So you have a couple of minutes to kind of probe and try a couple of different things and move them to where you need to move them.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of students, I guess, in the audience, or people who are thinking about a job change. And so there is a specific question about how do you show up strong for an employment interview? Is there
okay, I love that. Yeah, that's where it really comes in handy. I would say this, a couple of things. I'm not going to cover everything because we don't have time, but a couple of quick things. Know your stories, know your value. If you come in with pre-packaged kind of delivery and stories, that's not going to work. You have to have your stories ready, because if you're really present in a job interview, like I was when I was hired to be a coach, I had picked up that there was some reluctance in this guy's voice, and I was able to get that message out. So I wouldn't go pre-planned. I would go be present, listen, come with the stories about value. So many of the youngsters go, well, I only have internships and whatever. That doesn't matter to me. I've hired lots in the years, lots of youngins, and they've done great, right? So what I'm looking for as an employer is, have they added value? Do they understand their impact? Can they tell me a story? I'm not much about job titles. I don't care if I have 20 years of experience in X. Doesn't mean much to me. What means much to me is the impact. So at an internship, what did you learn? How did you solve a problem? I'm willing to take a risk on folks who are authentic instead of the pre-packaged. And I've been through, we've all been there. I've been there where it's like you might as well send in a videotape and it's all pre-packaged, rote kind of conversation. And I look for the folks who engage with me authentically, who ask great questions as well, who aren't just blindly going, hire me, hire me, hire me. I want somebody who's going to challenge, hey, what's this organization? What are its values? Does it align with mine? And we come from that different mindset, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about reset, right? And another question from the audience is, yes, resetting is possible, but it doesn't really happen instantly, right? So especially, let's say you are a leader, right? And you've screwed up not only the first, but also the second and the third impression. So what's the process, right? Can you then really reset instantly, or how do you approach a longer process of resetting?
Okay, so if I'm constantly having to reset, something's really wrong, right? If I'm resetting and resetting and resetting, excuse me, then something's not right. I'm missing something. So in that sense, then I would take if there's a disconnect constantly between me and my bosses or me and my team, and I've tried this and I've tried that, I've tried that, I think then it's time for some self-reflection, maybe, and this is hard for us, but maybe maybe I need to add value in a different way, in a different role within the organization. I think those are the deeper conversations you have to have with oneself. The pride thing always gets in the way. But I will tell you, I was working for a company in Colorado that got me into coaching because I was not adding, I was resetting and resetting and nothing was working. And finally, I went to the owner who was the entrepreneur owner who stayed way too long, but he was the one who built this amazing organization. And I said, hey, I'm not adding any value. I don't know why you hired me. We're constantly butting heads. I was the marketing director, and he knew the marketing better than anybody. He was a genius. I said, I don't even know why you hire me, because you're always going to know better than me, and you don't want me to make any decisions. So after resetting that, I kind of said, hey, and that morning I picked up a paper in the newspaper in Denver Post. There was this ad for this coaching firm in Vancouver, and the rest is history. So by kind of being authentic and saying, hey, this is, I've reset 4 times now, and nothing has changed. I think that's sometimes the best path forward.
Mm-hmm. So the second half of the title of your presentation today was showing up strong. We have a question in the audience about showing up too strong, right? Overshadowing maybe others in the room. Is that a danger? And how do you?
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is, because if you're dominating the conversation, and you're, and there are those personalities, what happens is that you start to lose trust. I mean, you may not be aware of it, but you start to lose trust. That's, you start to lose that engagement. Now people are in their collective memory, in the absent presence, and going, oh, that guy's an idiot, or she's an egomaniac, or whatever. So I think showing up strong to me doesn't mean overpowering. Showing up strong means being confident in who you are, being confident as a leader. I worked with a leader once who had a huge crisis, and he literally went out to the shop floor in Chile where I was working, and somebody said, what's the answer? It was a huge crisis that could have shut the place down. And he said, I don't have the answer. The traditional way would have been to come out and go, everything's going to be fine, I've got this. But by saying, I don't have the answer, he created more power for himself. He got stronger because people saw that he was speaking the truth. He didn't have the answer. And what he said was even more brilliant. He said, I don't have the answer, but we're going to find the answer together. And together with that workforce, they found a brilliant answer, and it changed everything. So agree, you can be so caught up in your magnificence that you kind of miss stuff that way. So strength to me is not just coming off strong with your words or your tone of your voice or whatever. It is sometimes that quiet strength that will have longer legs than the boisterous one.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end of our time today, but we have 2 short questions from the audience. One is, if your goal in front of an audience is participation and engagement, but nobody wants to speak up, do you have any tips of activating your audience?
Oh, that happens all the time. So here's what I've learned. I've learned not to kind of make any assumptions. And I'll give you an example. I teach a class at a university in India, and it's the weird time zone. So it's early in the morning for me. And the first time I did a class, there was like almost no participation. And you can tell my kind of modus operandi is I like the engagement. I like the feedback. And after the first one, I went, oh my gosh, nobody participated. They must have hated it. And then I talked to some of them, I want to find out, right? And they said, no, not at all. We love the class. They were all doing imposter syndrome. They felt like that because I was a professor, any question that they asked might be stupid or might be, and we tell ourselves in our head. So for me, the secret is to kind of let go of interpreting that, but understanding that if I'm live and I see that nobody's participating and nobody's leaning in by their body gestures, then that's a different story. And then I have to find a way to get them connected, which I will. Live on a Zoom, it's just almost impossible, right? So I've kind of let go of, in the Zoom stuff, I've kind of let go of, well, whatever. But we do tell ourselves this means X, and that's the big thing I'd ask all of you to avoid in terms of showing up strong, is that this means X. You have no idea what X means, trust me, right, until you ask.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So you come across as don't want to say extrovert, but a people person, right? What do you do if you're an introvert? How do you show up as an introvert?
I think it goes to the same thing, that introvert, it's that strength, it's the value. It's us extroverts need to learn how to go inward more. And that's some of the big gaps I see in the clients I work with in leadership, is the leaders who are outgoing or whatever tend to rise to the top, but there are quiet, reflective individuals in that team that add just as much value because they're reflective and they go inward. So if you notice, part of the beginning of this talk was really about stepping back, reflecting. My friend John in Azerbaijan, he got reflective. He did not engage in the emotional level of his boss. He quieted down, and there's power in that quietness. So if you are leading a team, don't get fooled by the folks who are always talking. There are silent influencers throughout any organization that actually drive that business forward. You just have to make sure that you're creating space for them.
But if I'm the introvert, right, and now I'm being put on stage, or I'm in a job interview, how do I manage that as an introvert?
I'd say you have to understand your value and find ways to add that value quietly. I mean, here's the thing. I worked with somebody who was an introvert. They were asked to give a speech. I found this guy, this was in the UK, he was drinking a pint in the hotel where we were at. And I'm like, dude, you're on. I didn't use dude, but now I do. Dude, you're on in like 5 minutes. And he was scared to death. He'd never spoken before. And we talked about, instead of the fear of the event, of what value. I went right to his value. And I go, this is a chance for you. It's going to be ugly performance wise, maybe, but you're going to add value. And I said, just be yourself, add the value the way you see it, the way you want to communicate it. And he was brilliant.
I guess it comes back to what you said earlier, right? That strong doesn't necessarily mean loud. It means self-confident, right?
Yeah.
In your own ways. Yeah. I have one final question, very detailed one. Somebody says that during your talk, they thought about a book called A New Earth. Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't. Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever had a bad experience where you intended to show up strong and then things fell apart?
Oh, all the time. Geez, come on, man. Yeah, absolutely. That's how come I know what works, because I've failed miserably. So I'd ask everybody to embrace failure, learn from it. And what's the famous Thomas Edison quotes? I've never failed. I've only found 10,000 times that 10,000 ways that don't work. Right.
Exactly,
so embrace the failure. I certainly have.
That's a great one to end our webinar on. Thank you, Paul, for being with us today and sharing your experience and your expertise. We really appreciate it. Come back often. I also want to invite the audience to some of our next events that we are putting on at the School of Management. We do have some local events here. Next week on Monday, we have a great event with the Austrian Consul General in Los Angeles about Europe and the war in the Ukraine. I also would like to highlight our next Forward Together webinar series, where we have another alumna, Anna Wickland, who is the managing director of Google in Sweden. So she will be joining us from a whole different continent. And then we have a few other events coming up. So please don't ignore our emails. You get our event invitations if you're on this webinar, and keep coming back. We really appreciate you, and I hope to see you again very, very soon. Thank you very much.
We thank you for participating in today's Forward Together webinar series, brought to you by the School of Management at California Lutheran University. The School of Management offers a broad range of programs and community services. Whether you're looking to upgrade your career, locate current economic data from our Center for Economic Research and Forecasting, or a place to start and grow your business at Hub 101, our community startup space, we invite you to visit us at clu.edu/SOM and join the community as we move forward together.